Even when they said, you know, we can make it whatever you want, to me that's like opening a can of worms too. At some point you've got to just draw a line and race it. Like, you can't just keep chasing more and more and more. I don't know what he's even doing down there, he's just stood in the hedge. Yeah. Hey Vital, it's Matt Walker, and this is my bike check on my new Trek session. Let's get into it. Components wise, we'll start on the cockpit, taken care of by Burgtec. So I've got Burgtec bar, stem, SRAM Maven brakes, ODI grips. I choose a long neck grip. We got RockShox, Boxer Ultimate fork, and Vivid Ultimate coil shock. Burgtec seat and seat post, seat clamp. Bontrager Proto Lab wheels with DT Swiss hubs. SRAM full 7-speed drivetrain, and Maxxis tyres and Crank Brothers pedals. I think that's it. Yeah, I think, well, the frame size is like a custom size for me, I guess. It's loosely based off of, from the previous session, the R3, which is the biggest size, so large XL, I would say. I don't actually know what the reach numbers are on this frame now with the headset cups we've got in there. But yeah, as I say, it's basically an R3. So the main pivot here, at the moment there's 3 different options. So there's a low, middle and high option. So it just obviously changes the pivot point, but then changes the ride characteristics of the bike totally. For me, I felt like the low position made the bike really efficient, and you could pump it and it would carry speed super well. And then the high pivot, it would just ate the bumps so good. Like, it was maybe a little bit less efficient, but it went through the bumps so much better. And I feel like it's pretty important these days with the tracks changing as much as they do from round to round. You know, you go from Leogang, you're racing the bike park, and you have a super flat middle section, to then racing at Val de Sol, where it's, as you know, super gnarly, big hits, steep, rough. So you almost need a bike that can do both. Where the lower shock bolt is, there's a nice piece there which you can change to change the progression rate. So at the moment we have percent, I believe, progression rates. Like, me and my mechanic were playing a little bit more and trying to find a little bit more progression when we were testing last week. And one of the really cool things with Trek is, like, he made a call to the designer that's in the Trek race shop. He said Matt wants to try the bike with a bit more progression, and like, that's it, you consider it done. Like, next time we go testing, that part will be made and it's something to try, and it's like, it's that easy. And that's what's so cool about working with a big brand like Trek, is they have so much infrastructure in the background to basically make you whatever you want. So it's pretty cool. No excuses program. Yeah, go-to as like a baseline is the Maxxis Minion DHR2 front and rear, usually with about 24 in the front and 27 PSI in the back. I fairly rarely actually move away from that. If it's muddy, then maybe I drop it a bit, or particularly slippy, but a lot of the time I kind of just fit and forget with tyre pressure. I tested inserts a while ago and I didn't really like the feel of them, so we always just went tubeless, and then ever since I've run tubeless. And to be fair, once I got on the Trek, I was asked if I wanted to run inserts and I said no, and then that's it. There's never been another talk about it really. It's basically whatever feels the best, and for me tubeless feels the best, so that's what we're sticking with. Yeah, I've spent obviously a bit more time now on RockShox. There's a few more different tune options and like rebound options with RockShox, so it took me a little bit more time to kind of test all the different options and kind of figure out what I liked. My mechanic Joe, he spent so much time working with the RockShox stuff and with the Trek bike, he kind of got me to a pretty decent ballpark straight away, so I wasn't puzzling too much to start with. Pressures wise, I've got 175 PSI I think in the fork, and then a 500 spring on the back. Mainly by feel, but then we always have data as a backup. Obviously for me, learning the RockShox stuff, it's important to know that when we make a couple of clicks on the suspension, how does that influence the data? So that if we're ever at a race and I'm a bit stuck with a setup and I don't know which direction to go, we can kind of look back at the numbers and say, oh, well, he was happy when the bike was doing this, and you can kind of backtrack and work out which direction you need to go in. If the rider isn't happy, but the data looks good, you're not going to go fast. and the aim of the game is going fast. So you've got to get the rider happy. So that's, I think, having the rider feedback is always number one, and then the data is just a nice tool to use in the background if you ever need to rely on it. So I've got a 30mm rise bar, and they're 780 wide. A lot of people ask, is that 780 with the grips or without? And for me, it's always without the grips. So yeah, cut the bar at 780, stick the grips on. Pretty simple way of doing it. I think I put quite a bit of time into it, into the bike setup, but once I'm kind of in a place where I'm happy, I'd like to just leave it alone. All my best results have come when I've just literally left it alone. So I think there's obviously a time and a place to tinker and test and try stuff, but when you get to the races, for me, it's time to like just ride the bike how it is and make maybe some small changes, but never anything drastic. Just basically get on and ride it. Like, that work should have already been done in my eyes. The other thing I'd say I'm pretty particular about is the brakes. Like, if the brakes feel wrong or they're not biting or like the pads are glazed or whatever, you can't ride the bike properly, or not at the speed you need to. So I think the brakes is probably one of the most important things too. That was the biggest thing that I noticed from the bike, is how strong the brakes were. Like, these are just out of the box. At the time, they weren't even bed in. They'd literally just been run around the car park and I rode them. And they were that strong. On the rougher sections going into the corners, I was locking the front up because I'd been used to pulling the brakes so hard to slow the bike down. On these brakes, they're so powerful that I was actually locking the front wheel in between the bumps. But yeah, the current setup I got is a 200 rotor, and they do a 220, which must be outrageously strong. And then I run a metal pad rather than a resin pad, I think it is. Imagine when it's super muddy or off camber routes or technical, and you need to be really you need to really finesse the brakes and not have them too grabby. It might be worth then trying like a softer pad material, so you just tame the brakes down a little bit. The only thing I do, which is a bit weird, is I always run the front brake a little higher than the rear brake, and it's only like a couple of mil, but anyone who jumps on my bike thinks the brakes are just off, and they are, but that's just how I have them. And I think it's because, like, when I was a junior, I broke my wrist. When I did get back on the bike, it was still a bit uncomfortable, so I must have moved the levers to get myself back comfortable, and I've never really gone back. They must have come a bit closer, but they're still a bit off, and when I put the front brake level, it feels like it's too low. The only other thing I've noticed, like with Ollie and Lockie, is they slam the seats down like it's a trials bike, slam it right down. But that must be like a new kid thing to do. I'm like 5 years older than so I have to run it up a bit. Everyone seems to run the seats slammed, like get it out the way as low as possible. But I don't know why that is. But it's nice having a bit of comfort in it when you ride to the lift and that. You don't have to stand up. Even when they said, oh, you know, we can make it whatever you want, to me that's like opening a can of worms too. At some point you've got to just draw a line and race it. Like, you can't just keep chasing more and more and more. So I think, like, I could have had probably any stem length I wanted, but it takes so much time to kind of test all the different options. I've always known I've liked 50, so we're just stuck with it. Same with the bar rise, bar width, kind of things like that. All the things that I know to keep constant, I have tried to do, because there's so much other stuff changing on the bike this year for me anyway, trying to limit the amount of stuff I need to test and try. Yeah, we did forget, but I thought it was important to tell you. I've also been running a mass damper on the front, which is pretty topical. Everyone seems to be running one at the moment, or testing one at least. I'd not tested one previously, to be fair, and then got given the option to try it. So on this bike we have an option to try it on the front, and then on the back behind the BB there's actually a bit of bracketry which allows you to fit one really neatly to the frame. And then yeah, I tried it on the fork and actually really liked it. I didn't, obviously because I had no previous experience, I didn't know what to think, but rode it and actually really liked it. I felt like it just calmed the bars down loads. It's kind of, it just gets rid of all that really small bump chatter. There's the kind of chatter you get when you ride down like a rough fire road, and there's nothing you can do with the suspension to try and get rid of that. It's always going to be there. But having that mass damper really just helped get rid of that, and it gives you a much more planted feeling through your hands, so it's just a bit more confidence inspiring, I guess, when you're like going into corners and stuff and you've just not got that unnerving kind of chatter. So that was cool too. And I did try it on the back for a short period too. And to be honest, for me, I'd never felt like I could feel the mass damper effect. It just felt like I had extra weight on the back. All in all, it feels pretty planted as it is, and I think that's always what we've kind of chased in the past, is trying to make it feel planted by adding weight. But it feels pretty dialed as it is, so. Definitely actually done now, yeah. There's nothing more.